So I kind of just realized that, like, I was being a little retarded. So, let me finish this and then I will explain. So, basically, right? What I realized is that, this would fill everything. Okay, so this would, by the way, I changed the variable names for I and V because it was a little hard to explain it without that. So imagine this is your keybinds table, right? So your keybinds table is right here, and you have an arsenal name, you have some arsenal data in here, and then you have some sets in here. So you have a sword set, right? This is your current keybinds, right? So this is not related to the keybinds parameter. So these are your current keybinds, right? So these are your current keybinds. What happens whenever you take the keybinds that the server sends in to you, to the player, you basically take the user keybinds, you index the arsenal name, and then you set it equal to arsenal data. So like, let's say the arsenal data that the server sends in is this, sent in from server. So if it's this, right? And let's say the server sends in that you need some weapons, and you need fists, and you also need katana, right? Okay, so you need katana as well, right? What happens is that it indexes the arsenal name and it sets the arsenal name to the arsenal data. So this is the arsenal data, right? So this whole table right here is arsenal data. It resets the old arsenal data and replaces it with a new arsenal data, right? So the way you get around this is just that you take it and you go. It's the same thing as the player.character thing that we did here, or we did like or this, or an empty table, or whatever. So we say user keybinds is equal to arsenal name equal to itself, or an empty table. So if there's nothing in there, it's equal to an empty table. Same thing with this. This is equal to itself, or an empty table. And then for this, we don't need to do that because we don't have any information inside this that like holds other things. This is like not a category by itself. I can't really understand. I mean, like, I can't really explain it if you don't understand, but you really don't need to do that. For this one is just fine. So for this one, you just do set name, action name is equal to action data. So now you would have this, and basically this is, if the server sends something in, it's going to loop through everything, arsenal, loop through every single set, loop through every single action, and it's going to make new action data. But first it needs to add little containers for the action data to go inside. You know, the moves, right? The moves have to be inside of sets, and they have to be inside of arsenals. So it has to make empty tables, or it has to be it has to make an empty table for that to like sit in, or that has to be there has to be an actual existing thing, right? So that's the reason why we have this. And yeah, so when you're kind of interacting with your activators right here, right? You want to loop through everything, make a connection on everything. You want to basically make it so that whenever they click something, it's going to take the remotes. So it's not going to do anything to the user keybinds yet. You can probably do something where on the server it adds in user keybinds on the server, but on the client right now I'm just not going to do that. Or I'm just not going to do that on the server. I'm just not going to add that right now. But how you would go about adding in the fist stuff is input remotes, So this is going to be remotes.input, and then we get also, should also get the remotes. So we have to get the assets folder, and then we also have to get all the remotes, so the remotes folder as well. So once you have this, you input remote, fire clients, player, add, and then you type in, or you send in everything you wanna give to them, right? So here, what I want to do is I want to add in a bunch of different keybinds, which are literally just, I want to add in a table, because remember this function, the reason why we have these different methods, by the way, is because we don't want to just fill every single time. We don't want to just reset every single piece of data that they have every single time. Sometimes we want to add, just add things to the table, so we have to have this add method. And that's also the reason why the server is going to instead just send in fill and not just like to add, right? Or I mean, that's why the server uses fill. That's why this uses add. But when we click this block, right, we want to give them the weapons arsenal, but we also want to give them the set we want to get them the set that is sword, right? Or because they're clicking this, right? But like, so we want to do this as well, right? So we want to say this, and then we also want to set it equal to every single keybind. So we also want to we want to give them the arsenal weapons. We also want to give them the arsenal. We want to give them set that is sword, but we also want to give in them every single keybind inside of that set, right? But this is dynamic. This is not just hard coded. So instead, we just do this. We just say arsenal name is equal to this. Sword name or set name is equal to this, right? Because it's not just hard-coded, right? Now you would have this. This is the table that you're sending, but you also want to send in, you know, your move data, right? So the way you do this is that you have to get all the little data, right? For their set, right? So you want to check the keybinds module. So this is like the actual keybinds module. You want to check it for the arsenal name, and then you want to check it for the set, right? So this would give you the table of whatever set name is, right? So this would give you all of the moves inside of set name, which would be one of the table of the module, right? The table of a module right here. So it would be like this, right? So you'd have keybinds, arsenal name, set name, right? Then once you have that, maybe add in different things, because I also added in default sets, right? So we want to add fists and we want to add sword, right? So sword is going to be like this. I think we're just going to have one keybind right now that's just called equip or something like that. So title is called equip. So you can make this however you want, but it's beneficial to have, or actually it's not really beneficial, it's just however you want to do it. I personally didn't want to put keybinds that are like relating to a sword, like in for example, imagine I have a mechanics arsenal, right? I just have inside this common arsenal I just have a set called mechanics, and it gives you the ability to press a button, and that button is for equipping things, right? I didn't really like that. I just wanted to do it like this, so I just did this. Okay. So every single little weapon has their own equip. Move, right? So that means that you can equip them, okay? You don't have to do it like this again, but it's cool, it's nice, right? So enum.keycode.e or whatever, right? I can't remember whatever the test was. I think the test was E as well, so I'll just do X. And then that is for the fist. Or actually, wait, is that the fist? That is the fist. So we'll just do lights, or we'll just do M1. We'll just call this M1, right? This is an M1. This will be enum.user_input type. Remember, user type is like mouse inputs, right? So this is the fist module, and then this is the sword module. So the sword module would just be equip. You can also have, we'll probably just go ahead and do this. So you can also have M1s as well. So I'm also going to do this input mouse1. So we just want two keybinds, right? I'm just going to make this X for now. Yeah, so our keybinds are set up. Our keybinds also, like, internally are set up. They can give themselves to the player. It works, or it should. What you should do now is find whatever you want for your default sets. Make sure this actually gives us, like, it actually gives it to the player. So we give the keybinds to the player, and then after that, I think we can start doing different kind of checks with the inputs. So I want to set up something real quick. I want to see if there's a test. So I'll see if I can do sword. We'll also do fist. We'll say local source is equal to empty table. Source dot equip is equal to empty table. Source dot M1 is equal to an empty table, and we're just going to duplicate this in a second. So yep. And this doesn't have an equip because it's just a fist, right? So, yeah. Then you have that. Have those. I think this should work. Maybe I'm gonna add some prints. Equip. M1. Also, another reason why you might not structure it like this. It's all about, like, structuring however you want to structure. But I put my equip function, like my equip keybind, in the sword, right? So inside of the weapon that I'm currently using. What happens when you delete a weapon, but the weapon is still visually equipped to your character, and, like, you already have it equipped, so your weapon's out, but you delete it, you get rid of it, you get a new weapon. What happens then? Because what if the keybinds for the sword, so in here, right, sword, there's an equip keybind, right? What if when you delete the weapon, you don't have that keybind anymore, so therefore you can't unequip it now? Now, you could make the game internally force the input, force you to unequip it before, unequip any weapons before you do any sort of what's it called, like, you know, equipping, I mean buying of new weapons, or selling of new weapon, or selling of weapons, or whatever. But then again, it's like, what happens when that keybind disappears? What are you going to do? Are you going to wait? Are you going to force them to unequip it and then wait until that's done to then remove the keybinds from the player? Like, how are you going to do that? Or are you going to have, like, or are you just going to have one keybind inside of like fist called equip, and it would just unequip or equip whatever current weapon you have, so the keybind never goes away because you're always going to have fists. Things like that, right? Or maybe you can make a mechanics set inside of common arsenal, or inside this common arsenal, and that has a equip button, right? So it's just kind of all about how you want to structure it, and I think this will work, but I'm not sure. Yeah, so it does work. It seemed to prioritize the fist first, but there's obviously the way I made the input system, I made it only do one. So if there's multiple binded inputs, it only chooses one. So it's going to prioritize just one. And now, like, you would probably want to switch that for your keybind system. So, for example, your keybind system, maybe you have it able to have multiple binded keys. Like, so you send to the server multiple binded keys instead of just one, and it will run every single one of them, but it does conditions. It runs conditions on them, checks if they actually work. For example, maybe both of the M1 functions work, except for one checks if your weapon is unequipped, which is the fist. That's when you would M1, and one checks when your weapon is equipped, right? And that would be how you would like actually do different inputs, or like different inputs that have the same name or things like that, right? You can also just call them different things. You can call one of them like punch, and you can call one of them slash, right? But there comes the problem of needing to find out names for your moves, which is, it's not too hard, but it's like, what if you just wanted to have like a name that represents every single M1, you know? So maybe expand your input system a little bit more so it can have multiple keys, but also it seems that the X doesn't work. So oh, that's why. I just realized I was like kind of running around just looking. But yeah, so now it works again when you M1 again. I now have the sword keybind. I didn't before, but when I equip, it just prioritizes one. So again, maybe you want to do conditions on your things, and so that kind of gets into the next thing. So basically for the next thing, you have different keybinds, right? Of course, but then I think you want to have helper functions, right? So for me, I also have helper functions. I think I call it data for some of my things. Here, let me see. Yeah, so I call it data. So I have data and helper functions for every single set. So you can call it whatever. I'm just going to call it helper functions, and I'm going to make one for each one of them, right? Each technique and everything. You don't need to use it, but it's helpful, because what you can do is you can just make it so that you have reusable functions that are only used specific to those that set, right? So for example, this sword set, maybe you have a specific condition for every move to work. You don't know where to put it, you put it here, right? You don't put it in your keybinds, because then like what would happen is your keybinds table would be like disgusting, and you also couldn't access anything that was like anything that's server based, because your keybinds module is also client based, right? Your client also requires them. So if you do anything with server storage, if you do anything with anything in here, or I mean, this is a replicated source, so this is fine, but like imagine you have more modules, or you want to interact with a different technique or a different module, and you want to require them, that wouldn't work because it's in your keybinds, right? So the easiest way to get around that is by doing helper functions, or you could call it data, you could call it whatever. I personally just called it data, but then I have helper functions for different things. So helper functions for me would be like abstracting my code to make it less long in length, because I didn't like how some of it would be too many indents, or sometimes it would be like there was just too much code, just all over my screen when I was just trying to edit like a few moves, right? I was just trying to edit like one part of it and there was too much code everywhere. So I didn't like that. So I just made two different functions, or two different things. And so for this helper functions, you just do this. Oh, also, I put the helper functions inside of the keybinds. It's not something you want to do. So helper functions, and then you clone this. So this just requires helper functions. Just make sure it works. Yeah, it does. Okay, and then you have your runtime here. So now we kind of want to shift your input system to be able to handle multiple inputs, right? Because the problem right now is that you can't do multiple inputs, and so what's happening is that your keybind, your fist, keybind is prioritizing itself over your sword, so you're never able to M1 with your sword, right? You're never going to be able to. And the way you change this is, instead of having just returning whenever you get one input that matches whatever you have, right? So here, right, we find a match, we're good, okay, it's fine, it's whatever. The problem is that we're just returning the instant we find that, and that's it, right? We want to have a table of the different inputs that are binded, like to that input, right? To the input that we pressed, right? So you can make something called binded inputs, a table called binded inputs, and at the end of this, we're going to return binded inputs instead, right? So instead of returning, right, we're instead going to add this to binded inputs, I think. Or you could just do instead, you could do binded inputs, or you could do table.insert binded inputs, and you're just going to send it in the table that we had before. But the problem comes again. So this is fine, this has a table. Now this is going to add in every single input, M1s, everything into one table. If we press M1, every single M1 is going to go into that table. That's cool, right? But the problem is that we have this valid thing, we have this valid checker, just to make sure we don't send unnecessarily a remote like to the server, and it would just like use up bandwidth and like network and all that, right, for no reason. So instead, what we can do is we can return true and then return this table of binded inputs. So this would be like this would be valid, and then this would be the match, right? The thing is, one thing you want to do is sometimes, I mean, this is just saying return true, comma, binded inputs. We're not actually checking if there's anything in the binded inputs table. So you just want to say, again, using the thing that we learned earlier, we would just say if the number of items inside binded inputs is equal to 0, we're gonna just say we're gonna return false. Otherwise, we're gonna return true. So this is basically just doing the same thing as before. It returns our valid part, and it returns our match part, and we also still have to change our system to work with multiple inputs. But there's also an error right here which says that you should reverse the condition. Don't know why, but it basically just says to reverse the condition. It just doesn't like it. So it just says if to reverse condition, and like the actual values. So this says if the number of binded inputs is not equal to 0, if that if statement is true, if this condition is true, we're gonna return true. And we can also say or nil or false, but if we don't return anything, right? If we don't return anything here, I mean, it's the same thing with functions where if we don't return anything in that value, it's going to return nil anyways, right? So now we're returning a table of our matching inputs or of our binded inputs. And so basically what we want to do instead now is we instead want to, because remember we have this from before, this doesn't really work out. This is now a table of inputs instead of just one input that we did. So we have to do for binds, for binded input in binded inputs. Also, we're going to change this match variable to be binded inputs. And we're also going to get rid of this because now we have a group of inputs, right? We're not just having one. And so we just move this all inside of here. Except for we need a boundary type, we need we need the action name, we need all of that, and so we'll actually get to this part, the little file server part later, but we need all that stuff. So we're just going to unpack the binded input because remember we're doing the same thing as before, except for we're just putting this this collection of info, this arsenal name, set name, action name, boundary type. We're just putting that in the table. So we're just looping over that table that we have, and then we're just gonna do the same thing as before. We're just gonna unpack that table of info that we need, and then we're just gonna check the boundary type for each function or for every single input that's binded to the key that we pressed. And then on top of that, we're then gonna either client input, so we're just gonna do this. Right, we're gonna do some client stuff, right? Or we're gonna instead we're gonna fire unpack the binded input, right? But the problem is that we're kind of sending every input one by one. But like we're kind of sending every input one by one, but it's all right because you kind of can't move this outside. Actually, I know. I guess you could. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. So we're just gonna check if the boundary type is gonna equal the client, and then we're gonna do the same thing as before, where we call the client function. But if it's not a client function, so nothing will work. I mean, nothing will run, right? This if statement won't run if it's a client function. We're just gonna see if there's any binded input. Oh, actually, first here we're just gonna fire the server with all of our binded keys. So a collection of all of our binded keys, all the arsenal names, all the set names, all the action names are binded to that key that we pressed. But the thing is, we could also technically have nothing. Actually, no, I think this gets rid of it. Oh, yeah, it does. Okay, so I was gonna say, if binded key or binded inputs has nothing in it, we shouldn't just unnecessarily send a remote to the server. But I just realized that this valid thing, this valid boolean, takes care of that for us, because it's gonna set if this is equal to 0, it's gonna set that to false, and it's gonna be not valid, and it's just gonna return before we even deliver anything to the server, right? So it works. Everything works. Okay, cool. That's our input handler on the client changed to match what we want, and on the server it's a little bit easier. It's just you take you're just gonna get every single thing here, And also there's one more tiny thing to add. We're gonna get the player, but we're also gonna get the binded inputs. Remember, we're just sending in every single input, like the collection of every single one of them. So we're gonna loop through the table again on the server. And on the server, we're also gonna then check if any of them are client inputs, because reminder. Or I mean, we could do something about this actually that would fix this. So we could do this two different ways, right? So we have if it's client input, it's going to work. If not, it's just not going to run anything. But it's going to send every single input. So let's say there is one client input and one server input in that binded inputs table. It would send us to the server, and the server would try to then call the module and try to process the client input, but that's a client input. We already took care of that. So we wanted to basically check, make sure it's not a client input. And remember, if you remember, we stored the boundary type in our information table. So we could just check if if it is a if the boundary type is equal to client, and if it is, we're just going to continue end, right? Basically just meaning that we're going to continue onwards because it's a client input and we can't process it because we're already on the server, okay? And if for some reason that that does work, okay, it does work. We're just going to do what we did before. We're going to call everything. We're going to make sure everything works. So we can do it like this, right? Check if it's a client input on the server, or you could do it like this, which I prefer. Also, we can, because we're going to do it a different way, we can also remove the other one, the last different value. Not remove it, but we just basically meaning we're taking it out of use. We don't have to use it. So if this is a client input, we could just remove this from the table, right? So we can call the client. So we can say index, and then the inputs index is equal to nil. So we're just removing it from the table. So this is, we don't even have to process it anymore to make sure it's not a client input on the server, because we're already removing it from the table as soon as we process it on the clients, you know. The one thing this does open up is if for some reason you were to press a key, and then after you press that key, for example, it decides to like, for example, there's one client input in there, and you remove it after you process it, it's still going to send this binded inputs table to the server, which could be now empty because we removed something from it, right? So we can just check real quick if now the newly modified version of that table has nothing in it. So we could check if this is equal to 0, the number of items in there, and if it is equal to 0, then we just return. So we don't unnecessarily send the remote to the server, right? It works. Okay, cool. So now, once we've done that, everything should work, and we should be able to have multiple inputs bind to the one key. So click this. Now we M1, and now both of our inputs now work. So you can see there's a tiny bit of delay visually, but they say they run at the same time. Yeah, I mean this one ran like a millisecond later, but yeah, now they're both binded to the same key. They work because our system now works with multiple inputs. The only thing is that you want to do conditions now, because you want to make sure that, for example, you unequip something or you equip something, and then, I mean, if you think about it, right, you want to make sure that only one of them runs based on if you either equip something or if you unequip it. And so to do that, we need conditions, and that's why we need our conditions thing. So we need to check. So our conditions are going to be inside our helper functions, right? Inside of the actual set module. So we can do set helper functions. We can do require set module dot helper functions. Or we can say if because maybe not every, again, you don't want to hard code things, so maybe not every set is going to have helper functions. Maybe not everything needs a helper function in it, and so we want to make sure that we don't want to just hard code things. You could just hard code things and be like, every single set will have a helper function, which is fine. But you might want to check if it exists first, which you can just do right here. So if set module.helper functions, then we'll require it. Then we'll check if the action name, so I mean, also to set this up real quick, instead of sword, for example, right, we're gonna have source, and then we're gonna have this, right? And then imagine we have a condition, right? So we want a condition, but we don't want a condition for every, just one condition for the whole set. Each move might need its own condition, right, to run. So the way you would do it is, I personally would do it like this. I would do either call it condition and then that, like the move name, right? So you can do it move name condition or condition move name. So you would do equip, or you could do in1 condition, right? And so when you do this, what you're going to do is you're either going to return true or false for this thing to either say yes or no. We're going to carry on to the next input, right? So what it's going to look like is it's going to look like this. So it's going to say if set helper functions dot, or we can't do dot because we want to do in1 condition, right? But this in1 is not like just hard coded, right? It's like an actual variable. So we want to say action name condition, right? So you can do it like this. Also action name condition. Then we're gonna call it, I mean, autocorrect does it for us, but if not condition, if it doesn't work, then we're gonna return n. This is wrong though. This should be continue because we're in a loop. We don't want to just, we're looping through things, right? If we return just on one condition, let's say one condition fails, if we return, that means the whole function just cancels, right? But we have two moves, and like we could have up to like 10 billion moves binded to one input, right? And we don't want to just cancel the minute one condition fails. We want it to only fail for that move that we're looping through, right? So that would just be continue, right? That's the thing you kind of gotta make sure if you're in a loop, you might want to use continue instead of return, you know. But by the way, you can do it like this. You can do the structure like this, like the naming or the inputting of things. But I don't know. I'm not sure. Cool thing. Okay, so this is another way to do it. So use a backward tick, which is above the tab, and then that would be your string. Okay, so that would be your string. You can put variables inside of curly brackets. So you could say like set name arsenal names. So if I did like print, or if I did like arsenal name is equal to weapon, and then I print this string. So what you're doing is this, it's a string, but it's using this little variable inside of the curly brackets, and then every single text is just like normal text. It's just a better way to format it, I think. and I think it's also just like less longer. So you do that, you have your condition, and your condition works, and if not, it continues, right? So we actually have to make the conditions now, and to make the conditions, we either return true or false, but we want it to be based on things. So for example, sword might be, we need some kind of reference, right? So we need to check if they're equipping, the player's equipping something, but we don't know which player, so maybe the function will send in the model or the character that's like doing the stuff, right? So maybe, for example, the function or like the server sends in the little entity or the character that we're kind of checking if there's a weapon for them. So weapon active, then return true, also return false. Now you also don't have to return false because again, this is a function, so if you return nothing, it's gonna return no. And so this is the same thing as for fist. You just do the same thing, except for this one is the reverse of the condition, because remember, this one is if the weapon is not active, right? So now you're only gonna have one that works actually. So if you look at this, oh, we also have to have the condition. The server has to send in the player who uses it, like the actual character. So we also probably want to get the character. So also the reason why we don't use player.character or character added is because by this time the character's already loaded in, you know, like they're already doing inputs, the character's 100% loaded in. They can't do inputs without that, right? You could check just to make sure if there's a character, and if not, you could just cancel the function by returning. But you know, just to be, just for quicker sake, you know. So we do in one, only one works, right? And if we get the sword, again, only one works, even though we have now multiple inputs binded to our mouse one. It doesn't work because we have our condition now, right? So that's how you can do conditions. But you actually have to implement the other thing about conditions, which is sword has an equip and it has an M1, right? You could just do if oh, by the way, one thing. So something I do is I do this. So I make the server send in like different things for the player to interact, or for the functions to actually interact with, because this one also had one, right, where we're actually doing things with the character. We're checking things with the character. We need some kind of thing for the character. We need the server to send it in, right? So we're just gonna do set attribute weapon active, and then this is going to toggle on, off and on, so it's going to be the opposite of the current attribute weapon active. So this would be pretty sure this would work. I can think of one thing that might not work about this, but I don't think it will affect us. So M1. Now you press X, you equipped it, and now the fist doesn't work. Okay, so let me check. So that should have equipped it for the player. They should have an attribute. They don't have an attribute though. Okay, it just went away for some reason. For some reason when you M1 it just like goes away, which is very strange. Equipping it, you click it, and then it just resets it. Maybe we do this in a different way where Do the fists do anything interesting? They do not. So maybe we do this in a specific way where we check. So this is like how you can kind of like. Oh, I found out why. That's probably why. Actually, no, that's not why. But you could do something where you check all the different inputs that you're sending in just for checking. And then okay, so oh, because I put a set attribute. Okay, so yeah, it should be get attribute, not a set attribute. Same thing here. That's why. So now it should work now. And then that's that. So now you click, it works, cool. Don't mind the debugging things. So now we click, we M1, that's fine, it works. It's going to say that we have two different binded inputs, although one of them has a condition on them, or both of them have a condition on them, but one of them is going to fail, always. And then when we equip our weapon, we click M1, and now the sword is only M1ing. We click the opposite, now the fist is only M1ing. We're equipping and unequipping. That's how you can do conditions pretty easily. And also make sure it's not hard-coded, which we did. So it's very nice. The last thing, where there's two more tiny things that you could do from here, which is one of them is using the entities. So the whole reason why I made this entities thing is because, for example, when a player joins the server, I wanna add in default keybinds, but I also want to add in a thing to the entities table, right? So require share the entities, right? And then we do I would do it in this function, but I don't want it to be messy, so I just change it. Basically, this would be function add entity player. So in my game, right, you have a bunch of different things. You have I'll just paste the whole thing in here for you to look at. So you have a bunch of different things. You have yeah, oh, that's the wrong thing. So you have a bunch of different things. You have a table, and then you have actions, repart, humanoid. So these are for it to be easier for your moves, your actions to actually interact with the game, the player, easier. I would like to set an index inside of the entities module, because the entities module is going to be it's going to be an empty table. There's going to be nothing in there, but at runtime we'll add things in there. So we're gonna add an index for every player, and then we're gonna pick and choose kind of what we want to add in there. So for example, if you don't like typing out humanoid.rootbar or character.rootbar or whatever, you kind of want to make a index in this table. It's like quick access, quick info. So entity would be the character, or the player, the character. This would actually be I do this because I also have NPCs in my game, so that's why I have that. But you can just make player, since we call this function with the player parameter. This would be player.character, this would be player.character, player.character. You might want to make a variable for characters. So for example, character is equal to player.character. Then you just copy and paste it. And then ignore this. This is like a list of moves that they have currently active for my game. Events is also currently like a thing they have currently active. A bunch of things you don't have to worry about. It's just for my game. This values thing, I'll probably make one more and then like talk about that. And also effects. But all these other things, they don't really matter. The only thing that matters is quick access info. So for example, this stuff, right? We add it into the entities. We're just adding into a new little thing, right? Whenever they join. So now this is added into the table, the entities table, whenever they join. So whenever they do inputs, what we can do instead is we can just say we want the entities module, and we want to get the index for the player, so we can get all the quick access info that we got earlier, right? So the way that would work would be replicated source shared, and then you would have all your different little modules, right? So this would be entities, and then we're just going to do local character. Instead of player.character, we can instead do make a thing. We can make a variable called entity, and then we can just say entities.player. And then we can say entity. Or actually, that would look weird because I just remembered that I do some weird thing where I call my characters entities instead of like actual characters. So it would be, for that, to get the character, it would be like entity.entity, which would look weird. So change it to entity.character. So now you have entity.character, that's the actual stuff you want. And then the quick access info would be you just sending in the actual entity itself. Then same thing for the conditions. You send in the entity, and so now what you can do instead of your actual functions, instead of your actual things, is you can say entity is equal to just an empty table. Not an empty table, there's more things in it, but like you kind of can't type it all out. So you can say entity.character. It's like that, right? And then you can also print entity whenever we do stuff, right? I can print entity dot, and so that's going to be an easier way to do quick access info instead of like actually having to send in everything at once. You just have a table of things that are added to an entity. You probably also want to make sure that here your player actually might not exist yet, so you actually do have to wait for it to maybe exist. But as you can see, we M1, okay, never mind, we don't M1, I guess. I forgot that our conditions are still not changed. So entity.character, and the same thing goes here, entity.character. So this is our quick access info table. Yeah, and it's an easy way to do quick access info without it being AIDS, and it's nice. So if this, we get a new M1, new binded inputs. The binded inputs don't work until we actually equip our weapon. So we press X, and again I have another error because I forgot to change it. from our old stuff. So entity.character. So M1, you know, and we equip our weapon, and we do M1 and 2. So whenever we equipped our weapon, we also printed the root part just as a test. We also printed all the stuff. So we have the animator, and we have the character, we have the humanoid, we have the player, we have the root part. Everything quick and easy right there. Okay, so that's how you can do that. As for effects, you know,